Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Monday Night Halacha class. Tonight, we are looking at microwaves and dishwashers, and we'll see, maybe we might even get a little bit further than that. This falling hot on the heels of ovens last week, which was very, very interesting to say the least, to learn that regarding ovens, that indeed there are positions to use a oven for both meat and milk beyond the more strict positions that we are familiar with. Now, again, why do I tell you some of these leniencies? I'm not telling anyone who has a home with 2 microwaves and 2 ovens and 2 dishwashers and everything else like that they're doing anything wrong. Quite the opposite. It makes it a lot easier and there are no issues. But I also want to do this to help those who have concerns that perhaps they're not doing it correctly, or perhaps they have friends and they're concerned that they're not doing it correctly, that there are multiple positions in halacha, some of which are mainstream, some of which are positions which we can rely on, and some of which are totally fine, 100%. We're not familiar with them. So I'm here to help with you. But I will tell you regarding the last week, and just to finish up on that, using an oven for both meat and milk, it's complicated, but certainly to wait 24 hours between using meat and milk, that's easy, that's a normal position, and there's nothing to be concerned about. But even for those who use the oven for meat and milk and don't wait 24 hours, it's a lenient position, but it's a mainstream lenient position. It's not one of those lenient positions that one reads about in an obscure book. It's a mainstream leniency as opposed to a leniency which no one's ever heard of. Now, let's jump into microwaves. May one use a microwave for both meat and dairy? Microwaves share a number of similarities to standard ovens, but they're also different in some significant ways. On the one hand, microwaves heat food by causing the water molecules present in the food to become warm, which creates much more ze'ah, which, as we said, is sweat or steam. You're literally sweating or steaming out those foods than in a regular oven, especially given the fact that microwaves are much smaller and the steam is more concentrated. So understand, with a microwave, what you're doing is you're causing the agitation in those molecules there by those microwave. On the other hand, though, the walls of a microwave oven are made out of plastic and usually don't get very hot, with some exceptions, which means that they may absorb less flavor of the food and they may be less concerned of basar v'chalav, of meat and milk. Given these conditions, should microwave ovens be equivalent to regular ovens? Should one treat a microwave in the same manner halachically as one treats the oven, based on whichever approach of the one described above one takes? According to many poskim, ideally one should use a microwave for either meat or dairy only. If we go to footnote 22, it says here, even Rav Shechter, who is more lenient concerning a regular oven, as we discussed last week, agrees that one must be more stringent with a microwave due to the increased amount of ze'ah, of steam or sweat that is produced. However, Rav Melamed, who is a contemporary posek in Israel, cites a minority of poskim, including Rav Nachum Rabinovich, Zecher Tzadik Levracha, who passed away this past year, and Rav Halberstam, who hold that there is no necessity for covering or separating between meat and dairy, as they feel the level of steam in a microwave is not sufficiently problematic. So here we go. And I just want to express that to you. Here, we have a battle of the lenient poskim. On the one hand, you have Rav Shechter saying you can use an oven within 24 hours for meat and milk, provided that you don't have them in together, and provided you let it cool down and then you turn it up again. But a microwave, says Rav Shechter, is different because of the ze'ah, because of the steam. Whereas Rav Melamed, quoting Rav Nachum Rabinovich, would say there's absolutely no problem with the ze'ah. And possibly the reason being because the heat going on in that microwave is not the same as an oven. So that's what we have. But as it mentioned there in the introduction, most poskim, and this is really true, most poskim say you need to have your microwave as either meat or dairy. And I'll say that unequivocally. In our home, you know, our microwave is set for one thing and everything else is covered. And I'm gonna make sure I get this one right. The microwave is for dairy, but it's covered for meat. And the Rebisa can tell me if I'm wrong. I'm only joking, I know it's for dairy. Although the walls often remain cold, since the food can get very hot and a large amount of steam reaches the walls, absorption nevertheless may occur, plus foods also splatter frequently against the walls. For this reason, the Sefer HaKashrut recommends covering all meat or dairy foods placed in the microwave. One may also kasher the microwave in between uses by cleaning it well, waiting 24 hours, and heating up a cup of water inside. If one wishes to use the microwave for both meat and dairy, the Sefer HaKashrut suggests the following guidelines. He says, Tanur mikrogil or mikrogal ragil, concerning a standard microwave that is used only for hameshamesh ach v'rak lehafsharat mazon or chimumo, is only used to defrost or reheat. Yesh hamatirim lahamesh bo lechalavi lebasari lechilufin. There are those who permit using it alternately for dairy and meat. How so? But Tanai, on the condition that the food is hermetically sealed and is not placed directly on the plate. For parv, one may use without a cover. Some are more stringent and use the microwave for one type of food only and rely on the aforementioned leniency only in cases of special need. Okay? So here the Sefer HaKashrut says, you know, the best way to do it is to cover everything, which is meat, cover everything which is dairy, and only leave uncovered, let's say you're defrosting or heating up vegetables. But keep everything else, keep it all hermetically sealed. I'm seeing where that footnote 22 is. Where is it? 23, here we go. Rav Forst in the Laws of Kashrut presents very similar guidelines as well for using one microwave for both meat and dairy, as does Rav Eliezer Melamed in his Pinei Halacha, who also allows heating either meat or dairy uncovered on a regular basis and covering only the other type when heating. And that's what we do at our house. Rav Melamed also adds that in his opinion, small holes in the cover does not transfer sufficient steam to render the microwave non-kosher, and certainly not for steam to enter into the food that is being covered. Rav Hershel Shechter is also reported to have ruled the same way. So here we go. If you've seen those covers, which you have microwave covers which have those holes, according to Rav Melamed and according to Rav Shechter, you can use those and one does not need to be concerned about steam. We don't need to have the situation of double wrapping, which can make using the microwave very problematic and very annoying. Not to mention that today we're actually concerned about all the plastics we use to heat food because of the concern of microplastics in our diets. For the same reasons, a microwave found in a public location should be treated as non-kosher, unless all of those who use it are careful to use it for only kosher meat or dairy food. One who wishes to use such a microwave should cover the food with 2 coverings to ensure that absolutely no non-kosher steam or flavor is absorbed by one's food. Footnote 24. For more practical information, you can go and see Rav Tzvi Rosen's Microwaving in the Workplace. Okay, and then you can ask me, I can send you a link to that. This is the same practice used on airplanes when heating up kosher meals. Although the meals are heated in a small non-kosher oven, they're packaged by the kosher caterer with 2 seals around them to prevent potential absorption. What is the halacha if a microwave was mistakenly used improperly, such as heating food in a non-kosher microwave or meat food in a dairy microwave? Does the microwave of the food become non-kosher? This question is subject to different opinions among the poskim, depending on their approach to some of the questions addressed above. Although some are stringent and recommend koshering the microwave and not eating the food, others, such as Rav Melamed, are lenient in certain situations. And he says, B'diavad, after the fact, im chimema b'lo kisuri k'nidrash, if one didn't heat it up without using the proper covering, hamachal kasher, the food is nonetheless kosher. V'im gam lo hayta hafrada ben hama'achal tzalachat, but if there was no proper separator between the food and the plate, the plate in the microwave which goes around, the spinner, yitachen she'atzalachat hayta meluchlechet ma'at b'shari ma'achal teref or min hasheni. There's a possibility that that glass plate which turns the food was a little dirty. And it could have had remnants of non-kosher food, or could have had meat on it and you were heating up dairy, or vice versa. In that case, in that case only, then the food would not be kosher for. So for Rav Melamed, the issue is only if you're going to put the food directly on the glass dish. But if you're not going to put it on that glass dish, then even b'diavad, if one was to cook something without a covering, it would still be permissible. Okay, let's just pause very briefly there. Are there any questions so far on microwaves? Now, just again, I want to return to my point. Regarding microwaves, I'm a little bit of an old-fashioned, which is use it for milk or use it for meat, don't use it for both. But I just wanted to show you there that using Rav Melamed, if one has a microwave accident, where let's say the husband was using the microwave when he shouldn't have, and he heated up some meat in there when it was clearly a dairy oven, according to Rav Melamed, the only issue would be if he had put the food directly on the spinner without a plate. And I don't know anyone who does that. Normally you put the thing directly on. I mean, that's not true. I do know, like, sometimes you can put, if you want to defrost milk, for those who freeze their milk, you can put it directly on the thing. But normally, if you're heating up food, generally you have a plate on top of the spinning plate. So I think we've learned there that according to Rav Melamed, if one has a microwave accident, that you would be okay. Now, here's the main event. One of my favorite topics of all time, dishwashers. And I love this when I learned this in Smicha, and it's one of my guiding principles for telling people how to live, because you know what? A dishwasher is a very expensive item in your home, and it's also difficult to always have 2 dishwashers in one's home. Now, those of us who have 2 dishwashers, tavo alehem baracha, may a blessing be upon their heads. There is no problem having 2. However, and I want to put this out for the record, there is no need to have 2. This is actually brought up in the Shulchan Aruch regarding washing dishes. Yireh li, says Maran in Siman 95, Seif Daled of Yoreh De'ah, it seems to me, she'im natno afar b'mayim, if one placed ashes into hot water, b'mayim chamin, shebeyoreh, in a large pot, let's call that a large dairy pot, shehinicha hakaderot betocha, and he places smaller meat pots inside of it. So basically you're using that large pot as a basin or a sink. Af al pi shehashuman davuk bahen, even though they have meat fat clinging to them, mutar, it is permissible, da'al yedei ha'afar, hu noten ta'am lifgam, because the ashes ruin the taste and make the taste negative. It makes it a ta'am lifgam. Therefore, I could apply the same thing if I put soap into this large pot, this large dairy pot, and I put these small meat pots inside of it, the soap is giving a negative taste, and therefore I don't need to worry about having meat and milk pots, wait for it, simultaneously, not one after the other. I could even have meat and milk together. The Shach takes the Shulchan Aruch to task, and he writes, Din ze lo nimsa b'shum posek v'lo shum echad me'acharonim izkiru gam b'vet Yosef. I've never heard of this psak. No one talks about it. I've never seen any of the Acharonim who writes about it, and even he didn't even write it. He bring anyone in the Beit Yosef who agrees with him. Adarabba, mashma midirei poskim, dein shum takana lahagil keli ben yomo im lo sheyesh b'mayim shishim neged hakeli. On the contrary, some poskim indicate that there is nothing that one can do unless the water contained 60 times the size of the utensil. And therefore, if it doesn't have 60 times the volume of the utensil, which is very hard to do, there would be an issue, and no ash or soap is going to help. The Pitchei Tshuva, another commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, disagrees, and he writes, it seems that the intention of Maran is not that ashes ruin the taste of the prohibited item, אלא כוונתו דווקא חכה בשר בחלב מהנה עפר, להקליש טעם שלא יכול עליו אחר כך שם בשר בחלב. What's his intention here? Specifically containing meat and milk, ashes are effective in weakening the flavor, so it's not officially called meat and milk. In addition to the resolution of the Pitchei Tshuva, in source number 25, numerous Achronim rule in accordance with the Shulchan Aruch against the Shach, as quoted by Hacham Ovadia Yosef, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, which we'll learn very quickly. In addition, Rav Ovadia Yosef and others hold that even if ashes are not necessarily notein tam nifgam, most cleaning agents today are strong enough that all opinions would agree that they do render any taste impotent. So when I take one of those cleaning, whatever you call those things in the those pods for the dishwasher, they're disgusting. You wouldn't want to put that in your mouth. And certainly if you had any meat and milk together, it wouldn't create a positive taste. Indeed, the notion of noten tam nifgam is widely accepted today as a legitimate leniency. Okay? And he says there, at least after the fact. And I'm going to teach you, this isn't after the fact. This is lechatchila. Hacham Ovadia Yosef says here in source number 38 that not only can you use the same dishwasher for meat followed by dairy, you could have meat and dairy in the same cycle. Afkan shamayim shematichim b'hem et hakelim, me'urav b'hem avkat sabon u'shar chomrei nikui charifim, v'notnim tar nifgam b'mayim u'v'kelim, mutar lahadiach kli basar u'kli chalav, afilu b'bat achat b'madiach kelim. Ki halacha ravachat hi shenoten tam nifgam mutar. And here too, when the water used to wash the dishes contains powdery soap and other strong cleaning agents that ruin the taste of the water and utensils, it's permitted to wash dairy and meat dishes even at one time in the dishwasher, since the well-known halacha is noten tam lifgam is permitted. Maskana de dina sheyesh loharot heter b'madiach kelim lekli basar kli chalav afilu beyachad v'rak miyot tov hechad de'efshar yesh latiach kli basar lechud u'klei chalav lechud b'zeh achal zeh. And the practical conclusion is that one may rule leniently about a dishwasher to wash meat and dairy dishes even together. But in order to do good, one should wash meat dishes separately and dairy dishes separately when possible, consecutively. And if we're dealing with bombshells and revelations, I will share with you that in our home, we do not have two dishwashers. We don't do meat and milk together in the same cycle, but we do a meat cycle followed by a dairy cycle. We do not rinse a water cycle in between. And this is normal Sephardic position and approach. I know that there are Sephardim in our community who follow a more strict approach, but I'm going to explain to you that that approach is based on Rav Moshe Feinstein. It's not based on Sephardic poskim. And again, nothing wrong with having chumrot. It's just important to know that it's a chumrah and it's not me'ikar hadin necessary. So let's have a look at that position of Rav Moshe Feinstein, which is the normative position for Ashkenazim. And by the way, while we're on this topic, just as one can go from meat to milk, one can also go from year-round to Pesach. You can also kasher your dishwasher for Pesach, and one does so by cleaning it out thoroughly, including the trap and everything else which goes with it, and running it on its highest and most soapy setting possible and the hottest setting possible. Let's see.
So what about the racks that are not?
So we're going to go into the racks now, okay? And I'm going to explain where the racks comes from, okay? So here, Rav Moshe Feinstein in Igrat Moshe, and this is a longer one, so we'll just read this one together in English. I already wrote in my work Igrat Moshe, Siman 104, that one must have two dishwashers, referring to what one places the dishes on, i.e. two sets of racks, one for meat dishes and one for dairy dishes. But that which I require that there should be others of what the utensil is placed on is because it is common the actual residue from meat or fat remains there and touches the dairy utensil and vice versa. When the hot water that is yad solelet bar then comes, it will cause absorption in the dairy utensil and vice versa. So he's really concerned about dirty, fat-stained racks and that the flavor will be transferred. And one should not rely on the fact that the water rinses the residue, since it's common that it remains, but people do not always check. Therefore, even if one decided that he will check carefully, one must be concerned that he will forget. Therefore, one needs two, one for meat and one for dairy. Okay? However, in the continuation of the same teshuvah, as well as in the teshuvah below, Rav Moshe does clarify the possibility of using the dishwasher for meat and dairy consecutively if one does, in fact, switch the racks. As he says here, concerning the new appliance that washes dishes called a dishwasher, as you see it there in the Yiddish, B'Shem dishwasher, whether one may wash dairy and meat dishes consecutively, we would need the area inside upon which the dishes are placed, i.e. the racks, to have different ones for meat and dairy. And the dishwasher itself into which the object used to place the dishes on them is placed, which consists only of the wall surrounding it, may be used for both one after the other. Now, just to explain exactly what's going on. We live in the United States. Rav Moshe Feinstein was the most preeminent posek of the last generation. And whatever he said regarding the oven and regarding the dishwasher became sanctified as the position for all American Jews, Ashkenazim for sure, and many Sephardic communities, because the weight of Rav Moshe was very much on everyone. Therefore, when you go and you find out, Sephardim do not use these leniencies I've described, not for the oven and not for the dishwasher, out of deference to Rav Moshe. And he said that you got to be careful with racks. And most women, again, also men as well, I'd assume, said, come on, I'm going to have separate racks for my dishwasher. It might as well, it's easier just to have two dishwashers than to have a dishwasher and two sets of racks. And that's why many observant families have 2 dishwashers in their home. Now, all that is beginning to change now that these positions are not just Sephardic versus Ashkenazic, but also many Ashkenazic poskim in Israel are recommending 1 dishwasher in line with Hacham Ovadia's position. And therefore, I recommend not to older couples or families who have dishwashers, but to young families who are starting out in life, I recommend to them 1 dishwasher. And I also permit a young couple who are moving into a home to kasher a dishwasher without requiring new racks. And that is also to do with the hard plastics, that we consider those hard plastics something which can be kashered, because hard plastic is very different to soft plastic and how it absorbs and what one can do with it. All that being said, the Badei HaShulchan is even more strict than Rav Moshe, and he says not only do you have to be concerned with the racks, you've also got to be concerned with the method through which the machine works is by spraying water to here and there into different parts of the dishwasher. And at the time of them being sprayed, there is not a ratio of 1 to 60 of those drops that brings the crumbs of meat to the dairy dishes. Therefore, it seems that one should not use 1 appliance of both meat and dairy, even if you're changing out the racks. Rav Mordechai Eliyahu, another Sephardic Acharon, he has a contemporary posek who passed away in about 2010, I think. He has a middle ground position, and he says some are lenient to use a home dishwasher to wash meat dishes, followed by dairy dishes, i.e. one after the other. This is what one should do. Number 1, tzrichim lenakot b'makom sheyesh sham mesanenet ulotzi kedei kol shairei ochel. Clean the area around the filter and remove any food residue. Number 2, if possible, lahachliv et harishtot, you need to change the racks. Number 3, im if that's not possible, yesh l'rochtzam yafeh, then wash them carefully. 4, lehamtin 24 shot, wait 24 hours. And number 5, turn on the dishwasher with hot water and soap before using. In pressing cases, one may follow number 1 and number 5 alone. And this is the opinion of Rav Mordechai Eliyahu, the Rishon LeZion. Okay? This is a complex area of halacha, says the footnotes here, and one should be in touch with their poskim. Now, regarding areas where perhaps there was a mistake and one put a meat spoon in the dairy cycle and one normally has meat only or dairy only, one can rely on the position of Hacham Ovadia, and one does not need to rekasher everything that went through the sink. Okay? That's a normal position also. So, here's what we have learned so far. Microwaves, I'm a little bit more strict. Ovens and dishwashers, I'm pretty open on that. That was based on my rabbis in when I was in Kolel, when I was in Smicha. And again, just generally in Israel, because we're not living in the world of Rav Moshe Feinstein, it was a lot more broader in their application of what was permitted or not. Okay. Stoves. Do I need separate stoves and burners, electric, gas, whatever it might be? Do I need separate burners for my home? Do I need to have meat burners and dairy burners? The Rama says, V'chein im machavat mechuseh, if the pan is covered, hakol shareh, everything is permitted. There are times when perhaps 2 pots are touching each other. You have a meat pot and a milk pot on there side by side, and they touch each other. This does not render the other forbidden by touching alone. Kol shekain b'ze'ah, and certainly steam alone would not cause any issues. Mihu lechatchila yesh lizaher b'chol zeh. Nevertheless, ideally, one should be careful. As such, the practice is not to have separate burners, but we don't normally cook meat and dairy at the same time on the same burners. Normally we do the meat first and then the dairy, or vice versa, but never meat and dairy at the same time. According to the Ramah, two hot pots that touch cannot transfer meat or dairy taste from one to the other without liquid. So too with regard to a burner, even if some meat spilled on the burner, the absorbed taste cannot be transferred later to a dairy pot placed on the burner without a liquid medium. And although the Ramah recommends being strict ideally, a stove is more lenient since one can assume that everything that's spilled will be burnt immediately thereafter by the fire before the next pot is placed there. Therefore, it should be permitted to use the same burner for both meat and dairy. This conclusion is also evident from a ruling of the Ramah and Mishneh Berurah, as we see here. He says here, Chatzuva tzarich libun. A chatzuva needs libun. Libun is when you do a blowtorch, where you hit it to a white hot heat to kasher it. Now, what is a chatzuva? The Mishnah Berurah says it is a utensil with three legs, a tripod, and one places a pot or pan on it in the oven on the fire all year round. If one wishes to use it for Pesach, one may perform libun in the fire, since dough is occasionally spilled on it and the flavor of chametz is absorbed through the fire. But this is only lechatchila due to the stringency of chametz, since in actuality, if two pots touch each other, the absorption does not emerge from one to the other, as we explained already in Yoreh De'ah 92.7. One can also assume that even if it's spilled, it was clearly already burned and has disappeared since it's constantly on the fire. Based on this, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach rules that one may place meat and dairy pots on the same burners, not at the same time, as recorded in Halichot Shlomo. Denaheginan levasher al ota chatzuva hein basar ve'hein chalav, and we are established to put both meat and milk on the same stovetop. Meat and milk. Rak yichidim machmirim bekach. But there are those who, alone individuals, who are stringent about this. V'chein beveit Rabbeinu, and similarly in our teacher's home, Rabbi Shlomo Zalman, b'shlo basar b'chalav al ota chatzuva. He would cook meat and dairy on the same stove. Rabbi Binyamin Forst, in his said that it's actually better to be strict, and he says some stove grates present less of a problem since the flame reaches the grates and presumably burns away any food residue. Therefore, some authorities permit use of the same grates for both meat and dairy. One who notices any meat residue on a grate should remove it before placing on a dairy pot on that grate. Electric stove ranges are likewise permitted since the coils burn away any food residue. Other authorities, however, question this practice and advise that one keep separate grates for each type, and many follow this commendable custom. So again, that's the Minchat Yitzchak, and those who wish to be strict obviously can do so. But here we see our position of kashering the stove grates on Pesach is only because we want to be strict, because perhaps there was some dough. But strictly speaking, even that is not necessarily. And certainly the meat to milk is not an issue because everything gets burnt off. Says the Sefer Kashrut, if a stove is used for both dairy and meat, one should treat all parts of the upper surfaces like a non-kosher utensil. Therefore, one should avoid placing food directly upon them, which we do. And if food fell onto it while being fried or cooked, it is forbidden for consumption. So here's the thing, because we're lenient, and we do use that stove for both meat and milk, anything which touches it is non-kosher. Anything which falls into it is non-kosher. If you want to be strict and have separate meat and separate milk, then whatever falls into it would be kosher and you could use it. But as I said, most of us are lenient and use it for both meat and milk, and therefore any spillages are non-kosher. Moreover, the Sefer Kashrut strongly urges one not to cook or fry dairy and meat foods on the stove simultaneously, as if the pots or pans touch and there is liquid on the outside of the pots, utensils, and food can potentially be rendered non-kosher. In addition, some hold that the steam can transfer flavor from one pot to another. And therefore he says one must refrain as much as possible from cooking or frying dairy and meat foods on the same stove at the same time. Likewise, while cooking or frying one of the types, one should remove all utensils of the other type and place them at a distance, especially when there is no need for them to be there at that time. And that's just good, practical, common sense, regardless of pressures. There's no point making meat and milk together at the same time just because of the possibility of mistakes. Now, hot plates. So let's say I'm in a Sephardic home and I want to have meat on Friday night, and instead of using an oven on Shabbat as a warmer, I want to use the hot plate because it has less issues of problems. Can I use that same hot plate for meat and for milk? Says the Hora'ah Be'urah, Uvishat HaTzorech, in the case of need, Mutar lahaniach ala plata basarit, one is allowed to place kedeot shel chalav uchadameh. One is, if it's normally used for meat, you can also put, in a pressing need, you can put dairy pots on the like, okay? But he seems to be that this is only if you need to do it. One shouldn't do this in a normal situation. Others, such as the Tosefet Halacha, suggest not relying on this leniency lechatchila, since there is a concern that perhaps dairy will spill on the hot plate, causing absorption. And he says here, in the case of an electric hot plate, beplata chashmalit, where water spills, there is not entirely burnt, one should not use one hot plate for heating meat and dairy even consecutively. And even if one is careful to clean the food substances on the hot plate every time, this is because there is still absorption. And if one places a pot whose bottom is wet, it will absorb what will be absorbed in the hot plate. In the case of great need, one should clean the hot plate from any food substance and watch carefully that the pot with the dairy food is not wet. Now, here's another amazing display here where I'm going to explain something of my own family practice. We use the same hot plate for both meat and dairy. We're just careful to clean in between. And I think it's enough to say we actually do have two hot plates, but because we do so much hosting, one small hot plate is often not enough. So we will end up using two most times. And so therefore we rely on this leniency also for it, and we don't consider it to be a concern since we're washing in between each time. Here you have on 50 all the way through 53 a summary of all these positions. And on page 54, we have one of my favorite new things to cook with, and that is a sous vide. Here's a question. Can you use a sous vide for both meat and dairy? Okay, and he goes through this on pages 54, 55, and all the way through 56 and 57. We're not going to learn it out inside. I'm just going to tell you what he basically says. If I'm using these sealed in Ziploc bags or vacuum packed bags, the meat or the dairy, I am concerned that the hot water bath will be a problem simultaneously to have the meat and the dairy cooked. But one after the other, one should not have the issue, since the sous vide is a glass or a hard plastic cooking device, and you're dealing with hot water. So if you're changing out the water, I could make meat, and then I could do dairy, and there's no concern that the dairy and the meat are being mixed together. Likewise, if I did meat first and then something parve, the parve thing wouldn't be considered a meat option even within 24 hours. So therefore, I've said to people, you can certainly use your sous vide one after the other, but certainly not simultaneously. Now, in our home, so far, we've only done it with meats. So we haven't tried any dairy or parve items. We've only done it for turkey and beef cuts and some chicken. We haven't tried it with anything else, but I thought that was an interesting position. Any questions so far what we've discussed with microwave, dishwashers, stovetops, sous vide.
This last one, did you say a sieve? Or
No, a sous vide. A sous vide is this special cooking device where you're heating food up. You're cooking it using a hot water bubble bath.
oh, okay.
It's a new way of cooking. It's very French. Yes, Sharon.
If you have one microwave and every single time you put something in there, it's covered with one of those special microwave covers. We have designated meat, dairy, and carb covers. If
No.
every single time something's put in there, it's covered, is that an issue using the same microwave?
No, if you're going to cover every time, then there's no issue whatsoever.
So it can be, because that's what we do. We just cover, we don't put anything in there. Only thing we put in there uncovered is if we're warming up a glass cup of hot water. But other than that, everything else is always covered. So it would need to be designated as a no microwave or in that case.
Exactly right. And what you're describing, that microwave would be a Parav microwave because you're covering the meat and the dairy. Absolutely. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. That's it for tonight. Have a wonderful evening.